It's bonus time!
Howdy there, young and Silver Mongoose here, back again for part 2 of my buyer's guide slash review for the 3DO. First thing we're going to talk about is that one controller port on the system itself. You would think that you would have to buy, a multi-tap adapter or something like on the TurboGrafx 16 to, play multiplayer games. But what they did on the 3DO, and I think this is ingenious, is they put a controller port in the controller. So, what you would do is take another controller and plug it into a controller, and you could do that with the next controller and the next, and you can actually have up to 8 people playing on one 3DO without having to buy any additional hardware. Now, this is great because you don't have to buy a multi-tap adapter. Some people don't like this idea for a couple reasons. One, they seem to think this means you have to sit close to people. But if you actually think about it, it means you actually get to sit farther away because you're connected to another person by a very long cord instead of all connected to a singular system. Also, people always say like, oh, my friend would unplug the controller because I was beating them at a game. Well, that's not a problem with the system. That's a problem with your friend. Ideally, the 3DO would have had another controller port at least, but again, they were trying to keep it as a multimedia system, so having multiple controller ports at the front wouldn't really help the image. So, this is the first model controller released by Panasonic. It's kind of a cross between Sega Genesis and a Super Nintendo controller. It has an L and R on the top, and a fairly nice D-pad. It's not up to Nintendo and Sega standards, but in my opinion, it's actually pretty good. And many of its buttons have kind of, pause and stop on it to, work the other multimedia on your 3DO. And it does have 3 buttons here. It really could have used a 4th button, because, it was 1993, and 4-button controllers and 6-button controllers had been out for a while now. And this meant that people really didn't like to play fighting games on the 3DO. Some people actually got adapters back in the day to use Super Nintendo controllers on their 3DO. Overall, the system, the controller is pretty big, but it's pretty comfortable. And overall, I think it's a pretty good controller. It's not as bad as people say, in my opinion. One other really great thing about this controller is that if you look on the bottom there, it actually has a jack for headphones and its own volume. So each player with this controller could, essentially have headphones and their own volume, and everyone would be happy. So there were other models of controllers released. This, I believe, is the Panasonic FC10 model controller, and you can see it is smaller than the FC1 controller. The D-pad's a little bit different. The start and select are rounded. The L and R I don't like as much, but they're still not bad. And overall, it's still a pretty competent controller. The one big difference is that there is no headphone jack on the bottom, so they did take that feature out, which, in my opinion, makes this old controller more ideal. 6-button third-party controllers were also released later on, and the Gold Star controller is really weird. Like, the D-pad is kind of on an angle, so I would personally recommend this controller whenever picking up a 3DO. One other thing that I'd like to mention about these controllers is that the cords for at least the first model controller are super long. You can see all that cord all bunched up there, which is great, especially since it's a multimedia system and it might be sitting, on top of your TV and not on the floor, so you have a huge cable to work with. Now, it's difficult to say exactly how many games were released for the 3DO in North America because it is a multimedia system. There were things on the 3DO like, edutainment and interactive movies and other interactive media, which some people might consider games while other people don't. So I've seen lists that say there are 180 games for the 3DO and lists that say there are over 200 games for the 3DO. One of the things people love about the 3DO often is these gigantic long boxes they have, which are that's the size of a standard jewel case, just to show you. And a lot of them, are really great. They have nice, thick, glossy cardboard. The only problem is that they are difficult to display because they are pretty long and don't fit on most shelves. Some of them have their own area in here for the disc. Some of them just have the jewel cases thrown in and open up at the top. And some of them come in these snap cases, like early DVDs, and have like these springed areas for the manuals and the discs, which I don't know what the purpose of that is, but it's kind of cool nonetheless. Now, the games themselves have a distinct style and flavor on the 3DO. The library as a whole, I mean. A lot of it has kind of a early 3D PC kind of feel, you know, 2D sprites in 3D environments, lots of changing camera angles, low polygon counts, full motion video, voice acting, a lot of things that feel really dated now. I find much more so than other systems at the time. But at the time, it was really mind-blowing. It was really cutting-edge technology. They were really pioneering a lot of 3D gaming. Now, on the library of the 3DO, there are good ports of PC games like Theme Park and good ports of arcade games like Street Fighter. There's also Dragon's Lair style games like Dragon's Lair and Brain Dead 13, and it also had its fair share of pornography interactive media, which I thought was pretty interesting to have on a video game system. The 3DO library does have a few large holes, unfortunately. One of them is that there is no abundance of JRPGs in the system. Traditional JRPGs on the 3DO, I think the only ones are Guardian War and Lucien's Quest, and there are a couple dungeon crawlers, but not a lot of true JRPGs. There's also a distinct lack of platformers on the system, which was important in the 90s. Other than Soccer Kid, Johnny Bazooka Tone, and Gex, there wasn't really anything to choose from on the system. Now for the games that I own that I would recommend. Guardian War I would recommend. It's a pretty good JRPG. The Need for Speed, a lot of people really love. It's a pretty good game. I'm not the hugest fan, but it's a pretty good game. Street Fighter 2 Turbo, which a lot of people feel is one of, if not the best ports of that game. Samurai Showdown, again, a very good port of the game. Corpse Killer, which is a very good, not very good, but it's a good like-end game. And Who Shot Johnny Rock, which I really like. A lot of people don't, but it's really campy. It's so bad that it's good, and I actually think that's what they were going for with that game. And I have 3 games here: A Mercenary, Wave the Warrior, and Quarantine, which I think they're average or below average games, but I've seen them on a lot of people's top 10 or top 20 lists, so I will mention them. And Flashback is a pretty good game. My favorite game on the system, which was sent to me by Craig from TV and Lust, is Return Fire. That's a very, very fun game. If you are getting the Maps O' Death expansion pack, make sure that you have the save file from Return Fire on your system. You don't need the game, but you do need a save file of the old game before you can play the expansion pack. And there are a bunch of other games which I don't own that I found that a lot of people find in high regard, and those games are the Alone in the Dark series, Starblade, Road Rash, Captain Quasar, Space Hulk, Lemmings, Snow Job, Burning Soldier, Gex, Wing Commander 3, Star Control 2, Theme Park, Killing Time, Out of This World, though a lot of people find this version clashes a bit. Make sure you look up a video of that first. Cannon Fodder, the Shockwave series, Lucien's Quest, D, Battlesport, Blade Force, and The Incredible Machines. So if you are getting a 3DO, check out those games. Some of them might be for you. And another good thing about the 3DO, which is worth mentioning, is that the North American 3DO can play most PAL and most Japanese titles. So that is an option. You can import a lot of games. The Gold Star version does have some issues with some games. And also, burned games work well on the system. So if you don't want to buy any games, I guess you could just burn most of your titles. Again, the Gold Star version does have some issues with this, so keep that in mind when purchasing a 3DO or importing games. So now on to the prices. I find that 3DO stuff has really gone up in price in the past 3 or 4 years. And the price for the systems depend on which system you get. Generally, 3DOs I find online go anywhere from $50 to $100 if you're patient, at flea markets and pawn shops and whatnot. I find 3DOs can go anywhere from $30 to $70. Personally, I think $50 to $60 for this model is pretty fair, but like I said, you can get it lower to $30. And for the FC10 model and the Gold Star model, they generally go for around $10, $15 more than the FC1 model. If you are getting the FC1 model, make sure you have some way of managing the memory in the system if you do plan on getting multiple games with large save files. Personally, though I don't have one and I've never used one, I think that the FZ10 is probably the better model because it is a top loader which lasts longer and personally I like more, and the AC cord isn't hardwired in like this system. The Gold Star model, it does have some issues with the tray opening, and it does have the most issues out of the other systems with burnt games and with import games. The games themselves, I find they vary quite a bit in price from day to day. A game like Gex could sell for $3 one day and then sell for $15 the next day online. But generally I find that 3DO games will be a little bit more expensive than other games of the time. Your good games will average out around $10 to $15, I think, but obviously there are still dozens of good games beneath that price. And of course you're going to have your occasional rare that costs $40 or more. The controllers, they are all, generally the same price. They're all around $10. But the light gun used for games like Who Shot Johnny Rock and Mad Dog McCree and whatnot is a little bit rare and can fetch up to $50. So that has been my buyer's guide / review for the 3DO interactive multiplayer. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and remember, classic gaming never gets old.